Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 28.
28.
Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Bit of a long time since our last episode.
It has been, yes.
Yeah, busy boys.
Yeah, we've been doing literally everything else.
Yeah. The time wise thrown us a bit out of sorts, I think, actually. We said we'd do like a reveal, director deep dive, spinning wheel thing. That hasn't happened. And then we did do it, but we forgot to film it.
Yeah.
And by spinning wheel, it's just taking names out of a hat. We dropped the amount of complexity required.
I think it started as a kind of elaborate spinning wheel game show type thing, and then it went on to take on its more simpler form.
Yes.
So it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you're still going to get the gold.
Yeah.
For those not following us on Instagram, what the hell are you doing?
What are you doing?
Get your search bar up on Instagram. Type in Cineboys to Cinemen.
With a 2.
With a 2. Cinebois 2. Cinemen.
That's it.
That's right, isn't
it?
Yeah,
that's
good.
Correct,
I'm glad. But we were going to announce the results in spectacular fashion. Obviously that didn't happen either. So for those that haven't seen it, its subject this week is another director deep dive on the Coen Brothers.
Yes.
Suggested to us by Dale and
Thanks,
drawn
Dale.
out of the hat. So thank you for that, Dale. We will draw another one after recording this episode.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean that'll be the subject of the next episode, but it'd be good if it's a director in which we have a few films of theirs we haven't seen. Gives us an opportunity to sort of study those films. Just sit in the living room and watch them in your pants. Legally.
We'll have to purchase them legally, of course.
Oh, I thought you meant the act of watching films in your pants wasn't. Had to justify there was some sort of legal element.
The old bills coming around. You're in your boxes. Just like, I was wearing jeans up until really recently.
I promise.
Yeah.
The Coen Brothers. Something that excites us both a great deal, as we're both pretty big fans of theirs.
I was saying to you earlier, like, I've seen most of their films more than once, which is like puts me in good stead. That's why I haven't written any notes, actually.
You feel confident.
Yeah.
No, fair enough.
So apologies in advance if I appear to sort of ramble a little bit. That's because I'm not reading off anything. So
no, I think it is good. I think you're right. It's obviously we did the Friedkin episode before, but I mean in terms of all the directors that could have been picked out of the hat, it's a good place to start.
Definitely.
Familiar, but with so much to them as filmmakers, the themes and ideas throughout their work, and the way in which they've endeared themselves to so many. I mean, we were saying this before, like, there aren't many filmmakers that are sort of eclipse the popularity of actors, or at least feel like they're on the same level as actors. But thinking about people like Spielberg and Tarantino, for example. I think whilst the Coen Brothers probably aren't quite as popular as them, I think they're quite sort of a recognisable duo in the world of film, or indeed outside of the world of film.
I feel like it's, if you mention their name to a group of people who aren't necessarily that into film, you get a good few people still knowing who they are.
Yeah,
and who have seen at least like 2 or 3 of their films.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. They have like a sort of popularity outside of sweaty film nerds, basically. So the way the discussion will go is we'll talk obviously about the themes and ideas in their filmography, chiefly through the lens of how the Coen Brothers utilise their lead characters. That says a lot about them as filmmakers and the ideas that they've chased throughout their 30-plus year career.
Like late 80s, I think they started.
Blood Simple was late 80s.
That's right, yeah.
We'll then rattle through a couple of our favourite examples of theirs.
Absolutely.
Obviously, I imagine we'll probably talk about the majority of them as the discussion goes on, but for the sake of brevity, we thought it best to maybe just pick a couple of films each to talk in a bit more detail about.
Perfect. Nice.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Questing the cinematic void. Joel and Ethan Coen.
Yes, but we're doing both of them.
Yeah, both of them.
Oh God, okay. I'll have a bit of a rethink.
When Dale suggested that he just put Ethan Coen, and I just thought, I think it's because he is it him that does most? He gets the director credit.
It's Joel.
Is it Joel?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I don't know what's going on there with you there, Dale, but it seemed unfair to pick one over the other.
Yeah.
I think it's because of like Academy reasons that they can't have like
they had to be an established duo for the guild, the Directors Guild of America, for them to be acknowledged as like each other's kind of partner. Really strange.
So one of them had to produce. So basically, just put the producer label on, although they're probably both doing an equal amount of each.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Strange, that, isn't it?
It is weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess to sort of kick things off, it'd be interesting to talk about sort of how the Coen Brothers sort of fuse old school Hollywood.
Yeah. Okay.
With their sort of more modern sensibilities.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then we'll move on to the discussion about lead characters, and then of course a couple of our favourite films. But first, let's talk about the Coens and that old school cinematic love.
Lovely.
Because it seems to me, anyway, and that a lot of their films, even films that aren't explicitly set in sort of classic Hollywood times, sort of 40s.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
A lot of their films borrow a lot from that era.
Oh, massively.
Not only the sort of like historical figures that were sort of most responsible for some of the greatest films of that era, but also things like narrative stylings of the most popular genres. Westerns, for example, which they lean on.
Particularly westerns, and
noir films as well. But I think westerns and noirs, and actually the sort of screwball comedy caper films.
Yeah, so like intolerable cruelty. And
and even like the Hoodsucker Proxy borrows from that quite a lot. They seem to sort of use what arguably were the three most popular genres of the golden age of Hollywood as sort of like
a
foundation or framework would be better. Yeah, a framework for all of their films, even if the films aren't explicitly westerns or explicitly screwball comedies or explicitly noir films. They do tend to sort of borrow from them quite a lot.
Oh, completely. Yeah, definitely. You got Western, I think out of all of them, the Western is... I mean, they've done a few overt Westerns, but there's kind of sprinklings of it in Fargo as well, and also the way that conversations in their films can be drawn out for quite a long time. Yeah. And that's another very kind of classical Hollywood approach, is just kind of letting scenes play out for like 8 to 10 minutes. And have that almost a conversation be a set piece. I think they do that really, really brilliantly.
Yes, agreed. I think also the way they shoot a lot of their films, there's a lot of those sort of like slow gliding tracking shots that you would see in classic Hollywood all the time.
The
use of lighting, I think, is very evocative of classic Hollywood. A lot of the sort of thematic stuff as well, and or perhaps a better way to say it would be like the narrative stuff. Like borrowing so much from them, so much. Like I want to talk about The Big Lebowski later on, because it's one of my two favourite Coen Brothers movies. And that's basically just like a sort of classic Hollywood noir film, updated with the Coen Brothers sensibilities and their approach to humour, which is always sort of quite sort of dark and oddly placed.
It
ties well with the violence, which is also something that they're pretty good at doing.
Oh my, they're some of the best, and the kind of way that it's presented is very matter of fact. I think especially in like I'll talk about this more later on, but like Burn After Reading, remember when Brad Pitt gets shot?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, just out of nowhere, and it's kind of like it's just presented to you as a thing that happened, and it's all over like that. Like it doesn't draw anything out. There's next to no use of they don't really like slow motion or anything like that. Like the way they employ things like camera work and those kind of aesthetic things is very subtle and difficult on a first viewing to kind of register. Whereas like in stark contrast to someone like Zack Snyder, who's like that's all you notice the first time. Absolutely.
There's something to be said as well about that sort of matter of fact way in which they cover, even some of the more sort of outlandish, what you would consider more outlandish sort of ideas in their films. So for example, the use of the wood chipper in Fargo. That's iconic now, and I think a part of that reason is because it isn't made such a big deal of. In the narrative and the way the actors, it's like, not that obviously there isn't a sort of awareness that there is something sort of off kilter and odd about it, but it doesn't feel forced.
No, and
it's very. It's sort of deeply embedded in their DNA as filmmakers, and it never feels showy.
It lets you digest what's going on slowly. So like there's it doesn't crash zoom to it. Right?
No.
It just cuts. It cuts, and there's a guy shoving a guy's leg into a wood chipper, pushing it in really slowly, and the camera doesn't even move. Like, he's just pushing it in there. And you're like, what's going on there? Oh, Jesus! Like, it takes it forces you to really, really like subjectively analyze what's going on. It's not, and there's no moments of there's no real moment of shock. It's a slow burn of a reveal of violence. And the same thing could be said for that scene earlier on in Fargo as well, when I don't know if you remember it, when they kidnap her, right? So the two,
wife,
Steve Buscemi and the other chap. She's just watching telly, and it just cuts to like these French windows, and he's just got a crowbar and a ski mask on, and he's like trying to jimmy it open, and he's like, it's so normal. She can see him, she can see it happening, and she's kind of like the audience, struggling to realize what's going on, and it's just like cut, shot, reverse shot, reverse shot. Like that's just how they present violence and how they present a lot of things. It's great.
Yeah, and I think it also works well in injecting humour. That's those sort of darker sensibilities that we sort of touched upon earlier. That the simplicity in which they frame sort of some of the sort of more outlandish moments or more violent moments in their filmography. It gives it sort of comedic quality. Doesn't it?
Completely. Yeah.
I want to talk about sort of the way the Coen Brothers utilise their lead characters, particularly lead male characters.
Okay, yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of the themes and ideas in the work of the Coen Brothers tends to go through their lead characters.
Yeah.
And they tend to, the journeys that each of these characters go on tends to sort of underpin a lot of the wider themes and ideas and influences on their own work.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The majority of their films typically, but not all, but typically centre on a male protagonist who is often a bit of a deadbeat or a loser.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, you've got Inside Llewyn Davis, you've got Big Lebowski, you've got Barton Fink.
Yeah.
You've got, you're totally right. I mean, even No Country for Old Men in some respects.
Oh, I agree, yeah.
Like, 100%. He's kind of a bit of a failure in that.
Yeah, he's not someone that's, living the life of Riley, for lack of a better term.
No, yeah. I mean, until he stumbles on a truck full of heroin.
Yes. Well, we're all waiting for it.
Yeah.
We all need our truck of heroin.
Yeah.
They all tend to be characters, as you mentioned earlier, in regards to Josh Brolin's character in No Country for Men. They're characters in varying states of not doing very well with themselves.
Yeah.
These are individuals who, by the metric of modern society, or indeed the society of the time in the films, and I don't think the expectations have changed much over the last 30 years, they're not doing well. They're not a success.
No.
They're individuals that, go by unnoticed and or sort of plagued by past mistakes. These men become sort of embroiled in a really sort of complex and difficult situation they can't get out of.
Yes, and they can't understand themselves quite often. Yeah.
They might not sort of like unknowingly fall into these sort of like oppressive power structures or anything like that, but they're also individuals that are trying to desperately hatch schemes to get them out of the situation they're in, the problems they're facing in their life, the sort of glacial nature of their existence. They quickly hatch a scheme that's going to throw them up the societal ladder far quicker than any other sort of like more socially acceptable manner.
It's always a quick fix, isn't it?
Yeah, there's always a quick fix.
William H. Macy is in particular's character in Fargo. Yeah, he is the epitome of everything you've just said, I think, actually, thinking about it.
And I think that sort of talks about this idea of how the sort of Coen Brothers, view the American dream in a way. This idea that, like, all of these characters want fame, fortune, and through that to be liked by people, revered by people who are in positions of dominance above them. Yeah. So if you think about William H. Macy's character in Fargo, his partner's dad pours a lot of scorn on him.
Yeah.
And this is a man, who is, doing quite well for himself, looking down on someone who isn't.
Yes.
And judging all of the decisions that he's made. Yeah. So on the basis of what society thinks or attributes as a successful lifestyle, a lot of these characters are failures.
Yeah.
And the reason that they hatch these harebrained schemes to try and sort of like, again, jump a few rungs up the social ladder or the societal ladder is because of that sort of frustration about the way in which people above them treat them.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite an interesting sort of, it inspires them to sort of hire hitmen to kidnap their wives.
It feels weirdly justified when they're doing it as well. Like when you're watching them, you're not like, what are you doing? You're like, I kind of see where you're going with this. You know what I mean?
Watch out, Hannah.
Yeah. But not obviously like to that extent, but it is an extreme. But within the world they've created, you're like, that makes sense.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying about those off-kilter sensibilities of the Coen Brothers, is that, they're taking like very real, grievances with the socioeconomic system, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better term. I can't think of anything better to say. It's never sort of like preachy. It's never sort of in your face, I guess.
No.
Would be the way. And that sort of sensibility and their sense of humour and their characterisation, it gives it a sort of a living, breathing quality, but never at the expense of the enjoyment of their narratives.
Yeah, you're dead right with that kind of idea about the American dream. Because have you ever listened to an interview with them too?
I have, but nothing where they've specifically said anything about that. So.
They're very humble guys by all accounts. Like they're not. You don't feel like they're overly proud of their work, and you don't feel like they sort of suffer from ego that much. And I think that is genuinely their worldview. Like they do kind of reject the idea of climbing any sort of social or professional ladder. I do think they really reject that. They're always so sort of soft-spoken and very matter-of-fact. They almost, when you hear them, it's like they're talking about a throwaway movie. It doesn't sound like they're talking about one of the best films of the 1990s, for example. Yeah. And I do really think that one of their kind of core values is a rejection of that sort of American dream of climbing the ladder and getting to the top at the end in order to be able to look down on people who are younger than you or less accomplished.
Yeah, so I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And it that sort of ties in quite nicely to what I'm going to say now. Is that, a lot of the characters who sort of concoct these harebrained schemes, they tend to be sort of full of hubris. They might not necessarily be arrogant, all of them. I mean, inside Llewellyn Davis, yes.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like they also have delusions about themselves and what they feel like they deserve and what they need, and they feel like they've already got the sort of tools to acquire it. But the reality is that they don't. None of them do. That's probably the strongest element about all of their films, is that where the sort of strongest comedic elements in their films arise, I think, is in these characters integrating with these systems and these often very oppressive sort of power structures to try and get what they want, but lack the sort of skills or talents or the personality to do so. A lot of these people, as we've said before, they're not the kind of people you expect having the balls to carry these things through. And if you think about from the talent perspective, inside Llewellyn Davis, it's implied that he's just fine. He's not like a bad singer, but he's not great either. And he doesn't have that greatness to rise to the top or justify his arrogance about feeling like he should be at the top. And if you think about, again, we keep talking about Fargo, but I mean, he thinks he deserves more
money from his job, I guess, and like more acknowledgement and
from
more
his
financial
stepfather.
gain.
But he's obviously not a great savvy businessman. He's not someone that's going to walk in a room and turn heads. He lacks charisma. And that's why he has to bring other people in to do the job for him, and that's where the sort of like where things start to break down, because the more people you involve, the more sort of difficult, and in the case of Fargo, hilariously complex it becomes. So I think there's something really interesting about that in terms of the characterization of these sort of leading men, is that so many of them are just completely incapable of dealing with the lot they've been given, and are then even more incapable of finding a way out of it, because they lack the sort of the tools in which to do so.
Pretty much every character in Burn After Reading is like that. They're all kind of stupid in one way or another, and that ultimately sort of leads to their downfall. And they all think that they're better than they actually are. They all think that the world is revolving around them, and it's really interesting the way that film's structured in that it's a kind of ensemble. Because the film isn't revolving around any of them, and you kind of like there's this fragmented narrative going on which ties all together, but it's all based on their own sort of idiocy.
Yeah.
Again, I'll talk about it more later, but it's one to watch if you haven't seen it.
There's a sort of, they're fighting a sort of a sense of determinism, aren't they?
Yes.
I think a lot of these characters in sort of Burn After Reading across a lot of his filmography, you know, with possibly the only film being separate from that is The Big Lebowski, which I'm going to sort of touch on more later on. But aside from the dude, most of his sort of male characters, you know, I think their sort of fate is already written. It's already set.
Yeah.
And they're not, again, they just lack the ability to be happy with that and always wanting more. And I just think there's something quite sad about that when you frame it against the sort of, I feel like, the wider thematic intent through lots of the Coen Brothers work about the idea of the American dream and what that really means. You know, it's about, you know, you're judged on your fiscal success.
Yes.
More than anything else.
Yeah. And your rank in society as well.
Yes, absolutely.
As a result, usually as a result of having money, like you get to hang out with the bourgeoisie, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Stand up, Mr. Marx.
Take that off the word of the day list.
But no, I think you're right, and it inspires these characters to do something about it, but they just go about it in the worst way possible.
Yeah, they are all like stupid, and that's quite an abrasive term, but I do think in the context of the Coens, it's justified.
Yeah,
because they are all stupid. But but in one way or another, they could be really clever in one way, like whether that be physically or they could be really good at something, but they're never complete.
No.
Yeah.
They're not adaptable to the scenarios that they throw themselves in.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, even like the sort of more charismatic characters, because there are some quite charismatic leads in Coen Brothers films. I'm thinking like, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah.
George Clooney's character's pretty charismatic. And Nick Cage in Raising Arizona.
Oh, mate. Oh, God. I forgot about that.
Yeah, these are characters that sort of have a bit more about them. But even then, it's sort of artifice, and it's still sort of masquerading a sort of ineptitude that is eventually going to bite them on the arse.
Well, like Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is what I watched last night. Have you seen that?
I have, yes.
Do you remember the first 10 minutes when Scruggs is like still alive?
Yeah.
He's just so charismatic. And he's like kind of almost comedically good at what he does, which is this kind of being this kind of like heightened Western gunslinger. But then even like you say, even then like that is ultimately his downfall. He just gets shot in the head. Yeah. And the film then becomes about something else.
It just moves
crazy.
on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's go into a couple of film things. I feel like we can thread these because I feel like a lot of their films, embody a lot of that.
Yeah.
Do you want to start?
Yeah. I'll start by. I know we've mentioned this quite a lot already, but I do really want to talk about Fargo because it's like in my top 10, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. The top 10 films, which that does shift like over time.
Of course. Yeah.
But at the moment,
I hate that question. People say when they say what do you like or what did you study or whatever.
Yeah.
It's such a sort of, and I don't begrudge people for asking it. I just hate answering it because you're in a situation where, particularly if you're talking to people that you know aren't that into film, you don't want to say like some obscure French film, even though you love it.
Yeah,
because you're like a twat.
I always go,
I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I struggle with that question, like because, like I say, the next day it could be something else.
Yeah.
And I don't really have one, but Fargo is almost consistently in there.
I mean, that's an absolutely fair shout. It's a brilliant movie.
Yeah, I just think it's like a modern fairy tale. It's one of the best told fairy tales, I think, that is set like the Coens are really good at. Like they're good at taking a very classically structured narrative and placing it in a modern context, but it retains the magic, which is why that narrative structure was so popular in the first place.
Yeah.
In the case of Fargo, it's the cautionary tale first and foremost, like with William H. Macy's character and like what he goes through, and also it's got possibly one of my favourite ever characters, Margie Gunderson.
Oh yeah,
who's just she's the loveliest woman. And they do play up that kind of Minnesota nice accent, which apparently is actually not really how people talk from Minnesota.
Okay.
But it is just employed in such a wonderful fashion, and this woman almost gets thrust into a Coen-esque narrative without conceding to it, right? So she just wrapped in this web, this bizarre web of like kind of crime caperish nonsense. To her, it's clearly nonsense. It's like another day on the job for her.
Yeah.
And the way she reacts to that is like gold. It's really funny.
Totally unflappable, isn't she?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
But still somehow is so agreeable to kind of hang out with for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
She's pregnant as well, which I think adds to it somehow. And she's got this husband who is, by all accounts, just as like nice as she is. And he works for the company that do the art for stamps. And she's like a police officer embroiled in this murder, like this kind of kidnapping, murder, suitcase full of money story. And he's that, but they exist in this kind of symbiotic way, which is just so wicked and so unique. There's a great scene as well, which is kind of out of the nowhere. It's a real character moment for Margie. She just goes to see an old friend. They go to the city.
Oh yeah.
And there's this guy who is clearly like recently divorced or something. And the way she handles, so the scenario is she just meets up with him because he's like an old school friend or something.
Yeah. God,
yeah. She doesn't think anything of it, and he kind of starts to break down and reveal that like he's kind of divorced and is in like he's like ridiculously lonely and clearly has a bit of a soft spot for her and like wants to take it further, and he's really pushing for it. And the way she reacts is like, despite the fact this is 96 Fargo, like the way she reacts is so like, I don't know, I mean I'm not a woman but it seems like quite empowering and like very like really firm, but retaining her sort of her personality and not having to get aggressive or anything. I think that's just such a great little throwaway moment.
Just a part of the film I've just not even thought about since I last saw the movie, but it's an interesting point, and I think it sort of combines with what we're talking about earlier about these characters all having lofty ambitions and suffering for it. You know, Margie's lifestyle and the way she lives, this sort of sedate, quiet life with a loving husband. That is almost a dream. It's sort of like the antithesis of what every other leading sort of Coen Brothers character, bar the dude, really wants. You know, and I think there's something to be said about just like leading a pure, honest life the best you can, and not sort of allowing yourself to be besieged by these sort of like societal expectations which can influence people to do bad things. That's a really interesting point.
I didn't actually think about it in that way either. That there's a great moment at the end where she's just talking. The wood chipper scene's just happened. She's got the two criminals in the back of her car. And it's not a very sad film, but it's a really sweet, somber moment where like she's just basically telling them off. She's like, here you are in my car, in the back of my car, and look out, like it's a beautiful day. Like, what have you done? You know, she's sort of trying to employ her very soft, sedate lifestyle. Just tell them like how good it is, I guess.
To sort of appreciate the simple things and the beauty of the simple things.
It's just like
it's a wonderful movie. I mean, I haven't seen it in quite some time, but it goes back to what you're saying earlier about the endless rewatchability of the Coens. I think that is definitely up there as one of their most rewatchable movies.
It is.
Alongside probably The Big Lebowski, I'd argue those two are their most rewatchable films.
I'd agree.
And it's interesting. I'd like to just pick up that point of what you were saying about the sort of it is fable-like, but you said
a fairy tale. Yeah,
a lot of sort of film academics, when they talk about the Coen Brothers, they talk about this idea of the sort of the Greek tragedy. And the Shakespearean tragedy, and the theme that sort of threads through both of those sort of ideas is that, you know, again, it's about hubris and that you're punished for it. And it's like a learning experience. Your punishment is like a learning. You know, you learn from it. As an audience member, you're supposed to think, arrogance is a bad thing. You know, and it can lead me to do bad things. You know,
very, very fairy tale like. Cautionary tales is like you can't if you fall down this trap. In the case of actual fairy tales, it's quite often like a weary traveller getting led astray by a light or something. But it's the same idea, but it's just, you know, in feature-length form.
And it's sort of siphoned through the Coen Brothers' ability to sort of really get to the sort of nitty-gritty of the sort of the worst kind and most reprehensible sort of behaviours that can come as a result of it. And
especially in America.
And I like it because it's not sort of, the fairy tale is embedded in the darkness of the era and of the time. And there is levity in the humour, but there is, if you think about Fargo, really, if you strip the humour away, it's a pretty fucking horrible story. Really.
I like the soundtrack is a good indicator of like the tone of the movie. Like it's so sort of drab, but also weirdly epic at the same time. There's a kind of, I'm not sure what it's like a wood instrument or something. It sounds quite unusual. I think Carter Burwell does all their soundtracks. And it's like a drone that builds slowly and slowly and slowly and turns into what simultaneously is like a really epic orchestral moment, but also that it retains that kind of almost gritty nastiness. I mean, I'm not going to hum it or anything, but Google it. It's good soundtrack.
I need to revisit the film. I need to revisit the soundtrack, but I probably should just watch the film. Oh, I do love a good soundtrack. No, great choice.
Thank you.
Great movie. And
could talk about that for years.
Fargo. I want to talk. So the two films I've picked are probably, I think they're my two favourite Coen Brothers films. And the first one I'll talk about is Barton Fink.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. As a sort of, you're more of a screenwriter, I think, than I am. Like I never kind of did it at uni or anything. So that makes a lot of sense to me that you have an appreciation for Barton Fink.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the sort of how the idea for the film came about, it exists purely because of writer's block.
Okay,
so Joel and Ethan Coen were writing Blood Simple at the time, which is again is another excellent film, another excellent addition to their filmography, and they were having an immense bout of writer's block, and they just couldn't figure their way out of whatever it was they were writing for Miller's Crossing. So they leave that script, go to New York for 3 weeks, and in 3 weeks they write the script for Barton Fink.
That is crazy.
So if you think about the themes and ideas of Barton Fink, and about the sort of insular nature of the writer and the writer's journey as a creative and the sort of internal conflicts they have, it really sort of has that the themes have that sort of added weight, knowing that the people that wrote it were writing it only as a way to get out of writer's block. Which I just think that's lovely. I think that's a really interesting. It's also, I just can't imagine doing that. Like, being like, oh, let's go and write another movie. Leave this for a bit.
Like the solution to having a problem with writing is to write. What that will never make any sense to me. But and I do love Barton. I think. What one scene that's, I'll sort of let you crack on in a second.
No, go for it.
The moment where the motel that he stays, is it a motel or a hotel? It just and John Goodman comes in and it starts burning down. There's like a transition there into like almost magical realism. All of a sudden, that's really catches. I remember it caught me massively off guard, but from then on in, the film strays into a sort of, I'm going to say the word meta sort of realm that it previously was only touching on slightly. You know what I mean?
This is the first film that Roger Deakins worked with the Coens on.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And
okay. Yeah.
So he obviously is the film is set in 1930s. Oh, in the 40s, sorry. It's on the eve of America joining the Second World War.
Right, okay.
So again, classic Hollywood.
Yeah.
Very literally this time. But what I love a lot about it in terms of the cinematic approach from Deakins is that the use of those classic sort of camera moves, the sort of sepia, tobacco-y, browny sort of colour palette. And whilst that sort of pays homage to the era, the style of the era, indeed, to the characters themselves, who are representations of key figures in Hollywood at the time. It also supplements the sort of more surreal elements of the movie that grow in intensity, and as you say, right up to the point where John Goodman sets fire to the hotel. And it sort of supplements that, but also it's also like an effective tool to understand the internal conflict of the creative process, or as a writer. And if you think about it in the context of the 1940s, the studio system was sort of famed for recruiting playwrights.
Okay.
So, obviously there were a lot of playwrights, many of whom were very socially conscious, playwrights who were writing stories about the sort of ills and failings of society. And they could do that in theatre because theatre was not as a big money a business as the film industry is, or was.
No. And more malleable as well. You could change it night after night, right?
Exactly, yeah.
As the times changed.
Yeah, exactly. Hollywood bring these sort of screenwriters in, or playwrights, and then get them to write scripts. And this happens to the lead character, Barton Fink. He's like a acclaimed, successful playwright with a who wants to write stories for the common man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he gets to Hollywood and he's writing a wrestling picture. And the sort of rhetoric from the Hollywood top brass is, we don't do socially conscious, we do entertainment pictures.
Yeah.
Because the thought process is that entertainment equals more money.
Yeah.
So one of the central conflicts of the film is, art as a creative practice, and it enriches both the artist and its audience, or as commerce, as a way of making a living, or as a way of making money. And it's interesting in the case of Barton Fink's character, because he's not really interested in making a great deal of money. But then this brings like an argument to him as a creative, like, am I writing something good that's actually going to be this epoch-shattering piece of work that's going to leave its mark on history, and it's going to be like something that many people can sort of take from and learn from and develop from, as good art in his mind should be. Or is it just going to be another throwaway movie that a lot of people go to, watch, and then that's it? There isn't a great deal of interaction. And I think it's a really interesting thing to pick up on, particularly in that era, as I think Hollywood was infamous for that, for sort of taking a lot of like creative people. Not that Hollywood couldn't do that, and it definitely did, but it was through the lens of always needing to make money.
Yeah.
So filmmakers and writers had to be a lot smarter about the way that they implemented their socially conscious stylings or musings, if you like, in these narratives. And I just think that's like a really fascinating thing for me anyway, when you're stepping away from the film, but in the context of the film it really embodies that conflict really well. Because writing is lonely. It is really lonely. I mean, I'm talking as a professional. I mean, anything I've written just sits in a drawer, But like, it is lonely, and you're sort of besieged by sort of like your own psyche, or your own sort of thoughts about how good or not good something is, and how your opinion can change when you come back to it. And just to have that additional layer of that conflict between chasing what it is you actually want to do, or making someone a lot of money, I don't know, it gives the film a sort of really sort of tense and almost sort of nightmarish quality. I agree with the nightmare and that sort of nightmarish thing. It is a really insular film as well, and particularly as it draws to its conclusion when or as the aforementioned fire happens, and that thing with the wallpaper, like, is it petroleum? Has he been like, does he put petroleum?
Like Vaseline or something. And then the painting as well. Is it the painting or a picture of someone on a beach? Yeah, that's kind of a motif, and he arrives on that beach at the end, doesn't he? No, I didn't. It's been a while since I've seen Barton Fink, but it's very apt that clearly the Coens had a sort of modicum of success with Blood Simple, were developing Miller's Crossing, and probably had a lot of these anxieties themselves of just like, okay, well, we're kind of now obligated to, because the studio is going to give us a lot more money to make something. Like, how do we use the constraints that are going to be given to us as a means to actually make keep our thoughts and ideas into the kind of weave them into the narrative, but maybe in a much more subtle way, so then we can deliver a film that is commercial but also retains our creative ideas.
I think it's the great battle any sort of fledgling filmmaker must have, because I think we talk about it quite a lot. I mean, we're sort of moving a little bit away from Barton Fink, but I think we've mentioned Chloe Zhao several times on the podcast as an example.
Like
filmmakers like her who, or David Lynch before her. Again, I think we've mentioned them both in this same breath.
Yeah, Dune and Eternals, right? Respectively.
It must be really difficult, because obviously you want to work in the industry and you want to keep making the things you want to make, but it's really difficult to make those kinds of films and that don't make a great deal of money for studios, and studios still have enthusiasm for your work, enough to sort of fund you and give you the money you need to keep working. So these filmmakers go and make these big movies, they're sort of in a bind, aren't they? And I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think if you think about someone that's done it really well would be someone like Richard Linklater.
Yes,
you know, like, I mean, not every one of his films has been amazing, the studio films, but you know, that one for him, one for you sort of attitude, I think he's still quite good in the choices that he makes in terms of the one for them. Fucking School of Rock, man. I mean, that's like you know, just a lovely film, even if it is a film that he probably wouldn't have made had he not sort of needed to. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I think, you know, bringing it back to Barton Fink, I think that sort of argument, that internal argument as to the worth of work when it is sort of, you know, designed more to make money, it's a really interesting debate, and I think it's something that still rages now. I mean, we talked about that in the context of Barbie in one of our, you know, referencing ourselves. But, you know, the idea of, you know, having a critical viewpoint on something, but from, you know, the position of a sort of billion-dollar film franchise, you know, it's not necessarily something that should be laid squarely and just at the feet of people like Greta Gerwig, but it does temper the critical edge of a film. Yeah. I don't know. So I feel like I'm going a bit off on one here.
No. It is what Barton thinks about, though. And also, I remember distinctly thinking John Goodman ended up being the devil.
Right.
Is that true, or is that me misremembering?
I don't know. I mean, I guess you could view it that way in some ways.
I remember the kind of sheer force of evil that he became.
Yeah.
Being like, sort of, it got a bit biblical towards the end, which I didn't expect, because I mean, the poster is just John. Is it John Turturro?
Yeah, John Turturro.
John Turturro, yeah. John Turturro of Transformers. Him just looking worried on the poster, and I thought, right, I'm in for an hour and a half of like quite a soft film. What I was greeted with was anything but.
He's quite good at doing those kind of claustrophobic films. He did Fear X.
Oh right, yeah,
which is another film about sort of, you know, paranoia and you know, sort of loneliness. Not necessarily about the creative process, but about something else. My brain escapes me what it is, because that was like one of the first films that I watched of Refn's after Drive when at university, and that was a long time ago.
So okay, yeah.
Got it on DVD though, so maybe I'll rewatch it. Yeah, he's brilliant in this film.
Very well cast.
Oh, superb.
He's permanently in a state of bafflement and anxiety, and that never really goes away until he goes into his picture at the end.
Yeah, I mean, like, we spoke early on about that sort of, those oppressive power structures. The Hollywood studio system is an oppressive power structure. You know, it's driven staunchly by one singular ideology.
Yeah.
You know, and that ideology is one of profit. Which ultimately is to the detriment of all art. If art is only about making money, then it's only ever gonna, you know, it's not. This is gonna sound a bit wanky, but it's never going to sort of impact you as much as something that doesn't. You know,
it's never going to break new ground, because by its very nature, the idea of making money often stems from like market research and analysis, and that's just going to be watching movies that have already been made, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
I mean, there's some, don't get me wrong, some great blockbusters, but you know, I think in the context of this film, it's interesting to consider, you know, how the sort of studio system is portrayed, and I'd not quite considered the idea that obviously the Coens would be very anxious about that on the basis of their fledgling filmmakers, that, you know, and you know, and there tends to be sort of like a real sense of excitement around, you know, all the filmmaker has to do now is make one really good movie. And the excitement just bursts, doesn't it?
Oh man,
think about people like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers and you know, filmmakers that sort of burst onto the scene with folk horror, and then everyone just got really excited about them, and you know, Eggers ended up making The Northman, which is a pretty big budget affair, and you can tell it's a big budget affair, and and it does, you know, it is different. I think I still quite like The Northman, but it is different. You know,
it is different from his other films, for sure. Like, it doesn't. It lacks the edge of his other two, and that's probably for the aforementioned reasons, right?
Yeah,
you know.
I guess this sort of thing to take from Barton Fink is that the battle between the creatives and the money men is always going to be there, and it's still here to this day.
Yeah.
So, right. Give us your film. I've rabbited on enough.
I've mentioned this already, but I do want to talk about Burn After Reading, because Funny story. I think I went to see like Iron Man 2 or something with a mate from school.
Okay.
And I didn't mind it. It's not great, Iron Man 2, is it?
No.
I came out of the film feeling pretty disappointed and a bit sort of almost dirty because by that point I think I was like 15 and I was like, my interest in film had kind of like peaked a little bit and I was getting a little bit more into films that were maybe a bit more hidden.
Yeah.
And I bumped
certainly
into...
for a 15-year-old sort of kid, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. You know, I think I'd seen Fargo by that point, for example, and I was starting to explore like films that came out long before I was born, for example. So I just watched Iron Man 2 and I was a bit like, oh. And then I bumped into another mate of mine who just seen Burn After Reading. And he was so enthusiastic about it. He was like, it's the funniest film I've seen, like I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, oh, shit, okay. And he was like really, really, really just jazzed about this film. And I watched it and I was like, so it started. I was like, why is it? Is this that funny? I'm not sure I'm getting this. I'm not sure if this is... And that was the Coens' kind of off-kilter humour not landing with me quite as much as it did on like a second watch. It's such a good, like, I love Burn After Reading. I think it's a bit of an underrated Coen movie.
Yeah, it's interesting you've picked it, and I think it's good you've picked it because I think a lot of people would gravitate to the films that I've picked, or other sort of, your Big Lebowskis, your Fargos, your
Tragedy of Macbeth.
It's they did go through a sort of period in the sort of early 2000s to late 2000s where their work was a little bit more commercial.
Yeah, they did.
And I'm not saying that this film is especially commercialised, but it's sort of in that period, isn't it? And I think that might be why there's a bit of reticence to sort of consider it in the pantheon of their best work.
Yeah, I think, it has the cast is, John Malkovich, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Frances McDormand. Like, it's got a lot. The cast is extraordinary, and you can tell that they're, by this point, like, they're
household names.
Yeah, the household names, and they're more commercial. So there is an obligation, and I think they'd mastered it by this point. They didn't have that Barton Fink worry anymore. They were like, no, we're confident now. We can do this. Low key confident. It's so, but like the way they use those actors for a start is brilliant because, like, again, going back to what I was saying before, they're all kind of idiots and they're all really, really deeply flawed people, and they're all kind of like going through divorces and like sleeping with each other, and they've all got their own scheme to better themselves. In the case of George Clooney, it seems to be just sleeping with everyone. Tilda Swinton is in it as well. So he's having an affair with Tilda Swinton, who is married to John Malkovich's character. Frances McDormand wants to have this like expensive liposuction surgery. Brad Pitt, Frances McDormand, like, they both find like this disc, which they think is like really covert, like CIA documents that like they plan on. This sounds so stupid again saying it in the real world. They plan on like blackmailing the government into giving them loads of money to give back these files. It turns out all that the disc is like the memoirs of John Malkovich's character, and so they're not like, nobody cares about them anyway. And it's just this whole like, it's almost like it reminds me a little bit of like Much Ado About Nothing, whereas like there's this huge big grand tale of where there's betrayal and there's like there's murder and things like that, but it's all based on literally nothing. Like it's all just people misinterpreting things.
And sort of creating narratives that aren't there.
Yeah,
which I think is a really strong theme of a lot of their work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even like in No Country for Old Men, he finds this big cache of drugs and he immediately there's an assumption there, isn't there, that like this is going to be his big break, when it sort of isn't. And like inside Llewyn Davis, same situation, as he thinks he's going to be the next big musician, whereas in reality he lives in a world where there are plenty of really talented musicians who are better or the same as him. So it's the same thing. It's just people misinterpreting their own
sort of a misinterpretation fueled by sort of their own delusion as
well. Completely. Like even Malkovich, who is the least stupid of all these people, he thinks that his memoirs is going to be his ticket out of recently getting sacked and stuff. Like, yeah, it's just if you like ensemble, I think the Coens are really good at ensemble stuff as well. It's like the best example of that, I think. Also, George Clooney has a thing about floors in the film, which is like a really weird throwaway joke. He walks into a room and he's like, "Oh, these floors are nice."
Oh yeah.
Just out of nowhere. It has no bearing on the plot whatsoever, but it's just really funny that like, oh, these are nice floors. I love that film, and more people should maybe talk about it again, because it came and went. I think
it definitely did. I think you're absolutely right with that. Yeah, I mean, even in my own mind, I mean, I didn't dislike the movie. I quite enjoyed it, but I don't remember thinking this is Coen Brothers. This is like,
yeah.
So maybe rewatch is required on that front as well. After Fear X.
Yeah, I think like. It was sort of their response to like the Bourne trilogy almost. Do you remember the start of the film? It starts as like a satellite imagery.
Oh god, yeah, it's quite a lofty beginning, isn't it?
Yeah. But then and so it starts out like a kind of the Bourne supremacy or something. But then the people that eventually zooms in are just like normal Americans. So I thought another just sort of funny kind of Coen moment.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I've been talking about that film for far too long.
No, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
The listeners are here for.
Yeah,
I hope. I want to talk about The Big Lebowski.
Okay.
Which I think is a pretty basic bitch film to sort of mention in the context of the Coen Brothers, but I think the reason I love it so much is because I just love I really love a good noir movie.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite genres. Classic Hollywood noirs are always something I'll gravitate towards. I'm no means, an expert on them, but I love them dearly. I think it's a genre that sort of best represents the sort of hidden darkness underneath the sort of pervasive American ideology at the time.
Yeah.
Family, wealth, God, all that sort of stuff. The trope I love most is the sort of narrative obscurification. The sort of the way it gives like the oppressive forces or the sort of criminal contingents a sort of omnipresence throughout the film. It makes things feel really claustrophobic, and every movement of the character is being watched. And they use the noir stylings in like the sort of Cold War paranoia thrillers of like the 70s, like Parallax View and All the President's Men. You know what I mean? That feeling of always being watched, and that these powers they're going to get you, and you don't know when.
Yeah,
and they're everywhere all the time. And I just love that. I think it's a real great narrative device for sort of speaking to this sort of the almost unknowable complexity of the world that we live in the modern world, or the America of then and the America of the 60s, 70s, and the America of now. And you were talking about this idea of these narratives that you create in your head. It almost supplements that as well. You don't know how much of it is real, or how much of it is in your own mind or in the characters' minds, and I think that's what makes the noir so interesting to me, both as classic Hollywood noir or the neo noirs that would follow it. But in the sort of case of The Big Lebowski, like obviously the noirish element is there. There's this sort of barrage of characters and their sort of shady machinations and all their sort of clandestine desires, and it all becomes a bit overbearing in the way the best noirs are. But the stakes are comparatively so low. Because all he wants is his rug back initially. And I think that's such a refreshing way to take the noir. I'm sort of paraphrasing the Coens when I say this, but they wanted to make a film about nothing. And I think that really the noir is perfect for that. It's also like we spoke about the hubris of their male characters is sort of representative of this desire to climb the ladder, which is almost like an illness that the system creates. In the case of the dude, that isn't the case at all. Like it's an inversion of their tropes in a way. Like he is just he's happy with his lot. He's happy just to sort of mill around, not work, bowl a bit, get stoned and listen to records. And again, it talks about the idea of the simple life, like like Margie. Although I think most people would probably think Margie's life is probably a bit
more wholesome.
A bit more wholesome.
But similar,
I think there's something wholesome about the dude though, and the dude's way of life.
And
the Coen Brothers make that way of life seem worthy. Like a worthy pursuit, just not being dogged by this constant, incessant desire to be improving yourself or being better, and just sort of milling around.
Yeah, no, he's got enough.
Yeah,
which is quite rare for any character in a film. They have enough. Like Margie has enough as well. She's got everything she needs, and she'll go and get more as and when she needs it. I think it's been a really long time since I've seen The Big Lebowski. I remember it having the worst DVD cover I've ever seen. Like it look. I mean, maybe that speaks to the film's themes a little bit of, you know, not really, because it's not about. It's very sort of anti-commercial in that sense. The DVD case is shit. It's really
just
bad.
those two on the front and the toe,
and there's a toe in it. Yeah,
and the green letter. Yeah.
It's a bit.
Still got it somewhere upstairs.
Product of its time, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think that what the oppressive force that comes to the dude though is in the way that people view his existence.
Yes, yeah.
So, like, you know, in the same way that these people who are trying their best to climb the ladder and failing are judged, the people that don't try are judged too.
Yeah.
So, like, it's almost like reminiscent of this sort of, you know, the battles between, you know, the old school hippies and the sort of conservative ideology of America at the time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the dude is obviously just like an old school hippie.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think it sort of feels evokes that sort of conflict between, you know, these old sort of ideals of, you know, work hard and you will achieve. You know, have a wife and kids because, you know, there's, you know, you won't know love like it. Love God as well. You won't know love like God. You know.
Yeah.
And, you know, he just completely eschews all of that. He's not interested. But what's interesting about him is he's not particularly critical about people that are, though.
Well, that's it.
That's what I like about it, is that in the face of all of this sort of, you know, judgment, you know, he's completely like nonplussed by it. You know, he's just not on that level, but he doesn't judge people that are.
Yeah. I think he's sort of, the only conflict he really has with anyone is his confusion over why these people can't just let him exist. They sort of refuse to just let him do his thing, and that's the only thing like that he reacts to, and he doesn't even react to it in any kind of violent sense. He's just like, oh, what? That's his whole mantra, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes. I think where the sort of classic male characters in the Coen Brothers film reside more is in the supporting cast of Big Lebowski.
Yeah, okay.
So John Goodman and Steve Buscemi both play these kind of characters that very much embody the different sides of the Coen characterization of sort of their male characters. You know, you've got Steve Buscemi's character, who is just this clearly quite a nice, likable guy, but he's just perpetually ignored by everybody. And eventually ends up dying in a really sort of like tragic, but particularly like sort of like throwaway manner, you know. And there's like obviously the great scene with the urn and the ashes.
That's brilliant.
So good. And then you've got John Goodman's Vietnam veteran, who can only really interrogate the world through aggression and violence. So he's obviously he's probably a product of some kind of trauma, but at the same time, he's, to his mind, the only way you get what you want from people is by being aggressive. So those you know, they're still there, but they're sort of relegated to side characters and characters that almost make, probably with the exception of Steve Buscemi's character, you know, the dude's quest, they sort of make it harder for him.
He's sort of happy to have them around though as well, isn't he?
He likes them. You know, he's obviously friends with them, and they're friends with him. There's something to be said about that sort of non-judgmental, non-committal attitude, just sort of coasting through life. You know, I think a lot of people are more captivated with it than they would admit. You know, I'm thinking about sort of Inherent Vice, the scene with Josh Brolin's character when he eats all the weed. It's almost like he's sick of playing this clean shirt sort of symbol of the government or the law. And he just wants to fucking cut loose and just sort of surrender this sort of, you know, he's buckling under the weight of the expectations that he's been given. I don't know, like, I feel like that film would work quite well as a double bill, actually.
It's odd because I was thinking about another PTA film in that context of Punch Drunk Love.
Oh God, okay.
I don't know why, but something about when you said about the rug, and there's something to be said there about. I mean, obviously Sandler's character in that film is vastly different. He's played with a lot of anxiety, but the way he views the world after he meets Emily Watson's character, like the way he views the world becomes a little bit more sedate, and the way he reacts to things changes almost to the same extent. Like he's so confused about the mattress stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of idea about like, you know, the rug and the mattress. Also set in both are sort of set in the same kind of place. I think is it Southern California, like that kind of low roof. No one seems to have stairs. Yeah, I don't know why that.
No, I think it's interesting you mention it, because I remember when we were talking about Asteroid City, we were talking about that sort of new age of American filmmakers who were attacking a lot of sort of issues with this sort of postmodern approach and having a sort of like off-kilter sensibilities and utilising, you know, the past as like an effective tool to interrogate the present and all that sort of stuff, all those themes and ideas. And I think the Coen Brothers are as much a part of that as anyone else.
Oh yeah.
I think they sort of flirt with it. I don't think they're as consistently in it, but they're I think some of their more straight-laced genre work is definitely a departure from that.
Oh yeah.
But like so good at just using, as we said right at the beginning of this episode, you know, classic Hollywood narrative tropes, and here it's just the noir. Once, you know, was just the byproduct of a Hollywood machine that was obsessed with money, used to critique those sort of same systems. I don't know. I really, really love The Big Lebowski, and it's great. Like, since we pulled the Coen Brothers from the hat, it's made me think about these films again for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting what you said about when you were 15 and you were just starting to explore movies properly beyond the sort of confines of what you're given.
Yeah.
The Coen Brothers, to me and to many of the people I remember speaking to on our film course back when we were at uni, the Coen Brothers seemed to be one of the first directors that you fall on. For that reason.
Absolutely, you know? And it does go back to like that cinema trip was like a big point for me of thinking like, right, I need to start going to see these guys' films, right? Because I think it's more interesting, and just I remember thinking distinctly like I want to be the person going to watch these films instead, because like someone I know from school is so like he was so jazzed by it. Whereas I should have been the one, because I'd just been to see like Iron Man 2 I think it was Iron Man 2 anyway. Like I should be the one coming out ecstatic and like full of beans, but I wasn't. I was like a bit drab and disappointed. So big turning point. And
it's good to it's sort of made me think about these films with almost sort of with fresh eyes, because not that I ever disregarded the Coen Brothers, because I adore them, but you know, when they are like the first sort of cluster of directors that you start really getting into, and you start really getting into films, it feels so early in your journey, and then you know, do you know what I mean? And then you sort of like you look back on it and think, oh my god, these guys are amazing, and you know, and yet I sort of forgot about them, and like when I talk about films that I love, you know, in a broader sense, but absolutely fantastic directors. And I mean, that's not necessarily that's a pretty trite thing to say really, but it's been really fun talking about a few of their films.
Definitely. And I also think it's quite easy to stumble on their influences as well, and visit who they were clearly influenced by. Like, so Big Lebowski, obviously if you like it that much, you can go back and watch The Big Sleep, right? Which is sort of a big obvious homage in the title there. Really
exactly.
Similar film.
Like the Raymond Chandler thing, right? Like, absolutely.
Wonderful. Oh, good chatting about those.
Good chat.
Good movies.
Good. We usually do this in the outro.
Yeah, no, we do. Yeah,
we've just jumped the gun, haven't we? Should we go there now?
Yes.
Good.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it. Then there we have it. Then, as mentioned towards the closing moments of our discussion, brilliant to talk about those two fellas. Big fans. But let's move on.
Yeah.
Before Ben gets his dirty little fingers in the Le Creuset pot, I did say hat before. I couldn't find the hat. Don't know where that's gone. And extract the next scrap of paper with the director, which will be the subject of our next deep dive. We figure it would be best to mention the film we're going to cover next.
Yes.
Because I think we're going to go back to a new release.
We are,
for the first time in a while, which would be quite nice, actually.
Yeah, no, it'd be good.
The Equalizer 3.
Yes, The Equalizer. I was about to say the Equalizer 2. That came out some time ago. The Equalizer 3. Personally, I don't remember seeing the first one, but I really liked the second one quite a lot. There's a great moment at the end. It involves a kind of like shootout between two men amidst like a sort of devastating hurricane. Which is like
that's right.
Really good action sequence. So looking forward to the third one. Actually.
I mean, it's a steady, solid piece of modern action cinema. You know?
I think so, and I mean, good to talk about Denzel as well and his career.
Absolutely. In
the context of this franchise and his sort of body of work.
Agreed.
Could be good.
And we can think of no one better to have along for the ride with that than Lee Markham. Back for the first time since the Canon Films episode.
That's right,
many moons ago. He's the one that actually broached the idea of doing this episode.
Yeah.
We didn't actually secure a date, so I'm just sort of assuming that he'll come along.
Yeah, he better had. Yeah. We've said it now. We
don't want to embarrass ourselves.
We've committed it to the podcast. So
it's a tightly run ship, as I'm sure you guys will agree.
Yeah, Lee, keep all of next week free, please.
Shall we find out who the next director for our deep dive is going to be?
Let's do it. Yeah,
cool. We're going to go live.
Just checking the connection there.
Here we are.
Well.
So, for those that are listening, we've just gone live on our Instagram.
Yeah.
As we're about to do the drawing of another director for our director deep dive.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got our first.
We've got to shout this out now.
Yeah. Gav, hello, mate.
Hello. So, without further ado, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Should we do it?
Do you want to give him a little stir?
Yeah.
And then. By the way, if you do have any other films that you'd like to, directors you'd like to recommend, you can always drop us a message at any point and we'll chuck them in the bowl.
Absolutely, yeah.
Go on then.
Right. We have got Jonathan Demme.
Jonathan Demme.
There we go.
Nice.
And that is a suggestion from Alfie.
Lovely.
So thank you very much, Alfie. Very much look forward to doing that. It'll be good fun.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we go then, Jonathan Demme. I'd be interested to...
Yeah.
See how that goes.
I can't remember a lot of his filmography, so I'm going to have to, in the next coming weeks, going to have to sort of dive deep into his work.
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs obviously goes without saying. I've watched that.
Yeah.
But I can't really remember much else. So
he's definitely someone that sort of goes under the radar of American cinema, but in the minds of a lot of his peers and actors that worked with him, he's one of the greats, certainly of modern cinema. So really looking forward to discussing his body of work. First time doing it live as well, which is strange.
Yeah,
I sort of feel a bit naked doing that, especially as we're sat in my house, which is in the process of being renovated. So it just looks like such a slapdash affair. We do have quite big plans with the future of that, don't we? In terms of the setting and stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to get a kind of proper sort of recording set up that we can kind of just, as opposed to borrowing microphones and laptops from work.
Yeah. But still early days.
Yeah, all good. Yeah.
A lot of things for you guys to look forward to, and for us too. The anime episode, I know we have a tendency to mention episodes that we're doing and we don't do them for a while. That is secured for the week after.
Lovely.
So the lovely Jordana will be coming in to talk about all things anime, mostly just films, because obviously this is a film podcast. But very much looking forward to that episode as well.
Nice.
So lots to look forward to. In the meantime, enjoy this episode, and we'll be back for the next one.
Nice one. See you later.
Bye.
Is it Demme? Did I say Jonathan Demme when it's Demi? I don't know. Just a quick correction for our listeners. I said Jonathan Demme live on Instagram like an idiot. Apparently it's Jonathan Demme, so there we go.